Hello there, and welcome to today's noon hour webinar about wildland fire mitigation and preparation for woodlot owners, part of the 39th annual Winter Woodlot Conference. My name is Olivia, and I have been the moderator for the series as the communications lead for the Ontario Woodlot Association. Before we dive in, I'll just share a couple housekeeping items here, which if you've joined us previously, you'll have already seen these. But just for anyone new who's joining us, everyone's microphones and videos are muted except for the panelists and the presenter. We are recording, so if you miss anything, you can view it later on the Ontario Woodlot Association's YouTube channel. And we do have a Q&A period at the end of the talk. So just at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little box that says Q&A. So you'll feel free to click that and put your question in at any point during the presentation, and we will address them at the end as we have time for. Now I'd like to hand things over to Paul Robertson, President of the Model Forest, who will introduce our speaker for this afternoon.
Thanks, Olivia. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see everyone on a rainy Wednesday. This afternoon, we have Ken Cox from the Ministry of Natural Resources. He's the provincial fire advisor who started with the MNR in 2008. That gives him 17 years of frontline wildlife fire experience. He currently lives in Haliburton and operates out of the Haliburton Fire Management Center headquarters there. He is still very active and was deployed in 2025 to 3 fires, one in Nova Scotia, one in Red Lake, and the third one in Kenora. So he does live in Haliburton, has a family, and he is our newest member to the OWA family. He loves fishing, particularly trout. And did you tell me what your favorite tree is? I think you said white oak. You said oaks in general, but your favorite tree is white oak. So we're looking forward. As you may be aware, we have a climate resiliency course that's going on, and fire is a big part of what we're sort of looking at around our property. So I'm very anxious to see what you have to say around fire management, Ken. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Paul. I'm going to share my screen here. It'll just be 1 second while it pops up. And Paul, you should be able to see my screen now just to make sure.
Yep,
Perfect.
we can see it.
The thumbs up. Awesome stuff. All right, folks. Well, yep, with that great introduction, thanks, Paul. I am Ken, your Southern Region Fire Advisor for the province of Ontario. So it's my portfolio to get to educate and speak to people about wildland fire mitigation, preparedness, and basically all topics wildland fire. It's key to know that I'm not an expert in any of the fields. I'm just the firefighter, and I'm backed by a tremendous amount of experts in their fields that support me every season throughout the wildland fire endeavors that we go through. I like to start off these presentations by showcasing the province of Ontario and how I manage wildland fire on the landscape and really the areas that we cover. Province of Ontario, very large landmass. It's broken up into multiple response sectors, as you'll see on your screen here by these squiggly red lines and blue lines and all that good stuff. Essentially what happens is down here in the south, Haliburton, where I'm from, is responsible for wildland fire management within this response sector down here, Southern Ontario. We don't do this alone. We do this in partnerships with municipal fire services, First Nation fire services, the Department of National Defense, local service boards, other federal fire agencies. It's not just the MNR that responds to and manages and suppresses wildland fire within this red box down here in Southern Ontario. It's a huge partnership, and we can't do it without those partners. Outside of this box, down in the south of this squiggly black line, which is going to interest a lot of you on this call, is what's known as the OFR, the outside the fire region. And for all intents and purposes, my legislation under now the Wildland Fire Management Act, previously the Forest Fire Prevention Act, previous to January 1st of 2026, my legislation doesn't allow me to come down and really conduct anything unless I'm invited by a fire chief or a land manager to conduct my role for the province of Ontario. So kind of a fun note there, but my legal jurisdiction is this black line for when an emergency response unfolds without being invited or to be invited. To showcase how we do that with our partnerships, real quick, the hash marked areas within this municipality. I just picked Muskoka Lakes because I was doing a presentation for Muskoka Lakes here in the next couple of days. And you can see hash marked areas on this map. When a call comes in and where my laser pointer is, that's where the wildland fire is occurring. The municipality's first tiered to it to respond. And if they need help, the MNR is tiered next. If the fire occurs in the spot where it's clear, that means it's MNR's tiered first and the municipality's tiered next. So inside the fire region of Ontario, oops, I went back too far. You don't have just one agency responding to wildland fires. You actually have always two agencies that have it on their radar to respond to and manage that wildland fire. OFR, it's purely your local municipality, your First Nation community, or your Department of National Defense Fire Authority. Whoever's the agency having jurisdiction within your area, it would be your local fire chief for that community that manages fire. The tools that we bring to the trade from the Aviation Forest Fire Emergency Services branch is just that, no pun intended, the aviation assets. Twin Otter water bombers, you have 9 of those as Ontario taxpayers. It's 9 CL-415s here in the screen. You probably have all seen those at one time or another on the news, or maybe even in person. We do deploy our aircraft across Ontario, whether it's inside the fire region or outside the fire region. They'll go wherever we need to send them for a provincial response. On top of that, they also support other national and international partners as well. So you look at the province of Ontario map that I showed you before, and it's got all those squiggly lines, and it's got fire management headquarters. And out of Haliburton, I'm responsible for the management of fire within Haliburton's area on that given day. Quebec's very similar, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, right across to British Columbia, and everybody in between. It's broken up the same way. When wildland fires occur, it's very likely that you get escalated pretty quick because it's hot and dry conditions. So that demands all the agencies train to the same standards and be able to support each other as needed. So these CL-415s or Twin Otter water bombers or helicopters, they all will respond to Quebec, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, you name it. I could go on and on and on and list all 13 partners in Canada, as well as Wisconsin, Montana, Idaho, Oregon, you name it. Any other agency that requires assistance, we'll look at that and support them as needed across North America. We don't just own and operate the water bombers. We also own and operate a few aircraft, helicopters, 7 EC-130 helicopters. Their primary role is crew transport. So you think back to that map I showed of Haliburton, and you think, oh, a wildland fire is called wherever you live, in your woodlot, for example, and that fire chief calls for MNR support. 9 times out of 10, well, even higher than that, 99 times out of 100, we're going to be responding down in your neck of the woods with a helicopter, and it'll either have the fire ranger crew, the folks in orange, on it, or somebody like me on it as an incident commander. And we'll come down and provide our support to that local municipality or First Nation community, whoever the fire chief is on that incident. The key role of the helicopter isn't just quick response. So coming out of Haliburton, responsible for all Southern Ontario, quick response all across it, compared to driving. Toronto, Canada, a long weekend would take a long time for me to drive in fire apparatus down in your neck of the woods. The helicopter doesn't just give us quick response. It also gives us a bird's eye view on the incident, on what's burning, what's going to burn, and then our values around that fire on how we're going to appropriately deal with the wildland fire. We don't just operate and have our own aircraft. AFFES, my team, the MNR, hires upwards of 200 rotary wing aircraft per season based on how busy the fire season gets, and they can be any shape, size, color, configuration you can imagine. Here you have a Bell 212 staple point helicopter for fire operations in North America, and you can see here unloading the crew, typical landing spot. You get out, your feet are soaking wet in the pump site or wherever you're getting out all your gear. This helicopter also comes dual equipped with a belly tank underneath it. So after it drops off the crew, it actually drops a snorkel down and will suck up about 170 to 250 gallons of water, depending on the configuration. And it drops that water in sequence in advance of the crew's progress. As they set up their pump, they got their hose line going, and they're making progress up the flank of the fire. This helicopter will then drop in sequence in front of them to reduce that fire's intensity. And that's a really key aspect too that I get to speak to, is the role of our aircraft, like the water bombers or the helicopter tankers. Their role isn't just to suppress, like extinguish a fire. It's just to reduce the intensity to allow our boots on the ground firefighters, whether it's your local First Nation municipal fire department or our M&R crews. It's a role is to reduce fire intensity so we can then go and follow up the perimeter and extinguish it. And that's our role. So why do we think about fire? Well, we switch gears a lot in this presentation. I'm going to switch gears completely now. Hopefully you guys have a good idea on me, my team, what I bring to the partnerships, and how we suppress fires across Ontario. But we like to talk about fire on why we think about it. And I like to roll back the clock to 2021. 2021 saw the busiest fire season in modern recorded history for Ontario. Out of the 1,200 fires that just the ministry responded to, that doesn't include the 5,000 plus fires that the municipalities responded to as well in the province of Ontario, 78% of our M&R fires were lightning caused. And that's a stat that proves that no matter if you have perfect human preventative measures in place and a tree was never to fall on a power line, or somebody's car was never ever to catch on fire on a highway and spread to the bush or the grasslands, if everything fell in place for humans, you would still see 78% on a busy season of fires occurring on the landscape. The 22% human-caused fires, again, talks to trees on power lines, any type of an incident that anything's not lightning, essentially. Your arson attempts, your unattended campfires, things of all those natures are encompassed under the 22% human-caused fires. You'll see out of the 1,200 fires, just over 1,000 of them were full suppression objective, and that's predominantly what's going to occur in Southern Ontario, especially for your woodlots. Down here in Southern Ontario, the amount of private land basin demands that we suppress wildland fires when they occur. I'm going to get into the pros and cons of that aspect in a little bit, but it's also important for you to know that the ministry absolutely allows fires to be either monitored or modified responses when they're not threatening anything of human value. So the fires up in the northern part of Cochrane District, for an example, if you think back to that map I showed, and you see James Bay and Hudson's Bay, lots of land mass up there, whereas the wildland fires can absolutely occur based on their natural involvement of the forest ecology and conduct their natural cycle, which is critical for the health and biodiversity of the forest. In 2021, we've seen just under 800,000 hectares consumed in Ontario, and that's going to paint a picture here for you in a little bit as I progress through the years. In 2021, there's a map of all the fires, and you can see lots of fires up here in the northwestern part of Ontario. Had a lot to do with their fuel type, their boreal spruce fuel type, that's predominant fuel type, and also comprised of jack pine. As you get down here in the Southern Ontario, a little bit less spruce component, well, actually a lot less spruce component, a lot less jack pine component. As you progress south, more deciduous. And we're going to talk about how deciduous species limit fire or reduce fire growth in a little bit. In 2022, I like to talk about the seasons first, though, because this is going to give you an idea. You can use your own observations in life to then think on how you're going to see fire in the future. There's no agenda from me. I'm just simply the wildland firefighter that responds to the calls and gets to talk to people about them. So I want to be able to paint you a picture on what I see, and then you can use your own judgment on what you might see in the future. 2022, we came into that thinking that we were going to have the busiest fire season ever. After 2021, we didn't get much snow and that load in that year of. And you can see here next to no fires. We only ended up the season with 270 fires and change in 2022. So it was a very slow season. 2023, the pendulum swung again the other way, and it was above average for busyness. Nationally, it was record-breaking. For Ontario, it wasn't. It was just above average. We were able to support all of our other province and territorial partners in 2023 with just an above fire season load in Ontario. Again, you can see lots of fires up in the northwest side of the province, not so much down here in the south. 2024, we came in out of that season of 2023 being told by lots of experts in their fields that we were going to see the busiest fire season ever in recorded history again, but the opposite was true. It was a very slow season, only 470 fires and change. So the pendulum swung yet again the other way, where it was a very slow year. 2025 ended up being a very busy fire season for us last year in the province of Ontario. You can see here lots of fires in the northwest, and actually quite a few fires down here in the south, in the southern panhandle of Ontario. Here, hopefully, I've painted a picture of extreme weather dynamics of getting a very busy fire season followed by a very slow fire season. And that's what we've seen as a trend since basically 2017, 2018 as annual averages. So what does 2026 have in store? You're probably all wondering, and you want me to tell you. Unfortunately, I can't tell you until November, until the snow flies. Like many things, as humans are very good at forecasting weather, but for all intents and purposes, my forecasts are only as accurate for short-term outlooks. So 3 hours from now, I can tell you what the weather is going to probably be like outside your windows. 3 months from now, that cone of possibilities really opens up, and there's no really way for me to say what the fire season is going to bring. But we look at trends and we plan accordingly for the worst case scenario, no matter what, in the province of Ontario. Those are the seasons. That's what it's shaping up to be. Hopefully that gives you guys some ammunition to think about in your future endeavors. And why do we think about that? Why does that matter to us as humans? Well, it matters to us because of the negative impacts of fire. A lot of folks automatically think of the heat and the flames and the fire itself as the negative impact of wildland fire. We also contend with the smoke impacts of wildland fire. And if you think back to June, I think it was June 4th, 5th, 6th of 2023, you could probably think back to those wafting days of thick smoke. Yeah, right on. I can see Olivia and Paul both nodding. Those days where we got thick waves of smoke coming through southern Ontario. This is what happened. We had fires burning up in northern Quebec, like usual. Usually there's fires burning throughout the boreal region of Canada throughout the fire season. You have here one north of Sudbury, a couple of them up there. These are streamers. Right where my laser pointer is the heat, is the source of the fire. And the streamer of gray, as I follow it down, is the smoke trailing off of them. So here you can have all those gray streaks of smoke coming off of the seat of the fire, right where my pointer is, for an example. And as those fires build throughout the burning period, they produce lots of smoke, and then that smoke gets condensed in the air. Oh my gosh, what's the name for it? I just spoke to it on the crew leader incident commander course last week, and I got to deliver it here this weekend coming up. Air masses. My apologies. Anyway, the smoke condenses and builds in air masses and pockets, and it'll get super thick and then move through your region. And that's what you've seen. You've seen daytimes, the day previous's burning conditions of smoke waft through southern Ontario in June of that time period in 2023. Are you going to see it again in the future? You betcha. You probably absolutely will see it again in the future. Just depends on where the smoke is carried from the winds aloft. Now, I can't talk about wildland fire and only speak to the negative impacts of it, because that's biased and unfair for the natural ecosystem. Wildland fire has countless positive impacts to the ecology of the Ontario land basin, as well as all North American land basins. You can probably all attest to this as woodlot owners. You've probably been out in your woodlots and seen the charred stumps of fires long past of history in your woodlots or through your adventures in the forests. And fires has an integral role. For Southern Ontario, fire's role is almost annual. For the Black Oak Savanna and for the plains of Southern Ontario before European settlement were conducted with annual ignition from the application of First Nation application of fire. It built the most beautiful mosaic patterns of habitat reportedly throughout Southern Ontario, and fostered a very unique landscape with the use of fire annually every spring, as projected. As you transverse north, a lot more frequent fire occurrences from lightning. And in my home area here in Haliburton, the fire return frequency historically was every 16 to 37 years, right where I'm sitting in my fire management headquarters. If you roll back the clock 5,000 years, every 16 to 37 years, a low intensity or a fire of some sort would have gone through right where I'm sitting. So that's pretty frequent for a natural disturbance event to come through. It's almost as frequent as storm damage or ice damage in terms of what you see now. Us as humans, we heavily altered that cycle 100% over the past tenure, since World War II, essentially. The use of fixed wing aircraft and now helicopters, our advancements in technology make us extremely efficient at putting out fire very quickly. And you don't see those massive fires taking effect across the land basin untreated nearly as much as you did prior to World War II. You can see here in this photo, I took this photo in 2021. This is fire called Kenora 51, and it's about 25 kilometers of flame front backing towards the Manitoba borders over here. And as I came around this backside of this fire to go check on my Mexico 20 packs up here, working this fire's edge, it was a perfect opportunity to take a picture of old growth forest in the middle. For all intents and purposes, I don't know when the last time this was consumed by fire. Then we burned here from the 1980s, and it was a semi-mature jack pine stand. And then I had a burn here from 2012, more recently, and it was still very much so an open mosaic pattern of vegetation and whatnot. And so here you have different overlapping areas and edging areas of forest. Oh my gosh, what's that called when they grow? I'm really a bummer for words today. I can't think of succession. Different intervals of forest succession, coming up from the natural disturbance of wildland fire. And that's just what it is for Ontario and North America. Its positive impacts are huge, not just for species that directly benefit from fire, like lodgepole pine or in Ontario, jack pine, but more so even a little species that rely on different age stands of that forest succession. So your Kirtland's warbler, as an example, is one of the species that prefers an immature jack pine stand to nest and breed in. I don't speak Kirtland's warbler, so I can't speak why they prefer that stand to nest and breed in. But essentially, they need that old forest fire to have gone through to produce that monocultured stand for them to nest and breed in. Other species, your woodland caribou, and then you go right down to your white-tailed deer, your moose, your bear. They all benefit from more open landscapes where the sunlight's hit herbaceous materials, and you get your blueberry crops, your raspberry crops, your fresh grasses to feed all those species, while then also having thermal cover where areas didn't burn. You might think, and a lot of people have asked me previous to this year, what about the critters when a wildland fire is occurring? For the critters that their natural tendency is to evade predators through climbing trees, such as young black bears, raccoons, porcupines, mountain lions, things of those natures, those types of critters. They absolutely climb trees, and unfortunately, they're a higher impacted fatality group of species that I've seen in my past 17 years. But your other critters, such as coyotes, foxes, hoofed animals, they usually flee down to low water areas, and the fire will pass by them. I took these photos here this past year just to show you one moose. There's a couple other moose here in this low-lying swampy area, and as the fire passed over it, they seeked refuge in the swamps. Same here. I know this is a terrible photo. I took it with my iPhone 12 before I got destroyed on another fire, and I got a brand new one here for this year. So hopefully I'll get you better photos for next presentations. But there's a black bear down here, a mature one that didn't climb the forest stands and retreated down to the water's edge and let that fire, as you can see, a pretty aggressive fire in the background, rolling on past it. And it's just there, living. So with that, wildland fire being incredibly important for the ecological benefits of its existence, the ministry doesn't just suppress fires. We actively work with partners and through partnerships to apply fire where appropriate. The benefits of prescribed burning can be ecological for the species that are living within this an area. They can be silvicultural for replanting, say, white pine that needs mineral soil exposed for better germination. And then also we have hazard reduction burns. So Wabaseemoong First Nation, north of Kenora, also known as White Dog First Nation, they actively burn off the heavy biomass of built up of grasses every spring under low moderate conditions to reduce that fire load, that if unfortunately in the future it does catch on fire during extreme weather events, then we can control the fire under low moderate conditions, get rid of the biomass, as opposed to having a fire come through in extreme weather events and driving a very problematic control fire through that same fuel type that's now reduced. So that's hazard reduction mitigation, and they do that actively every year. Just hats off to them. All right, that's fire. I'm going to switch gears completely again, and I'm going to talk about what you as woodlot owners will look for on your specific woodlots in terms of manipulating fire if you want to. You don't have to. This is all nice to know. This is all just here for you for information. I'm not coming down on you with an iron hammer saying you shall do any of this. It's just if it fits your lifestyle, it fits your interests, and it's something that you want to practice, you're more than welcome to. And you can reach out to me after this presentation for more questions specifically as well, if you like. So wildland fires, in a nutshell, it's not complicated. That's probably why I stayed with it for my career in 17 years. They only exist because of three elements coming together: heat, oxygen, and fuel. You have to keep in mind the fuel side of this fire triangle and what you see on your screen. It either has to be brown and dead or not retain enough moisture to allow combustion of that fuel. It also, you add in the conifer component of it. Conifer as a fuel type has a chemical composition that accelerates fire growth just because of its chemical composition compared to a deciduous tree. But for all intents and purposes, in the springtime, let's just say in 2 weeks from now, maybe 3 weeks from now, or whenever, everybody probably wants the snow to be gone in tomorrow. But whenever that snow leaves, as that snow is gone and the sun starts heating up the brown dead material from last season's growth, within about 3 days or even 2 days after that snow's left, you get into some of our most volatile fire conditions that Southern Ontario sees through the entire year. Southern Ontario typically sees lots of grasslands. I'm going to talk about that. But ultimately, you get your fire started from heat, whether it's a lightning bolt, whether it's arson, whether it's a tree on a power line, doesn't matter. You get your start. Combine that with oxygen and fuel that's readily available to burn, you get the starting of your fire, like you see here in this photo. This is a legal fire, by the way. This is the start of a prescribed burn for training advanced investigators on how to determine sources of ignition. So don't get me caught up on why you see a photo of a fire starting. It's a legal PB. The fire environment is then what drives a fire once it starts. So it starts off as its little spark, as its little flame, and then it behaves based on the topography, the weather, and fuel around it. Again, you'll see fuel and fuel, the two common denominators of a fire existing wholly, or once it starts to grow and behave, how it behaves based on fuel. Topography is pretty simple. Fires that are on the bottom of a slope and burn upslope, they get the opportunity to release their heat aloft, and that preheats the fuels ahead of them upslope faster, so it accelerates growth upslope. Vice versa, if a fire starts at the top of slope and has to work its way down, it takes much longer for that fire to go down slope. If it's an even playing field, it's just equal. Weather, very huge denominator in wildland fire behavior. You're all going to become weather experts here on the next slide. But fuel, that's how us as humans manipulate or eliminate fires from starting. And for fuel, I took a day just to showcase you exactly how different fuel types produce different types of fire behavior. On May 11th of 2023, we've seen a temp of 23, an RH of 34, and a wind speed of 10. So what that is, it's a beautiful spring day that you're probably out enjoying your woodlots, going for a walk, and it's one of those t-shirt weather days that we all look forward to coming up here in the spring. If a tree fell on a power line, let's say, adjacent to this boreal mixed-wood stand, and a fire started and grew, it would have its max potential at 4 meters per minute in the fire intensity class 3 through this stand. If on that exact same day that tree fell on a power line, but it's right next to this boreal spruce stand, same weather conditions, everything other than the fuel type is the same, that fire would spread at 9 meters per minute in fire intensity class 5. So what that means is on the top left side of your screen here where I'm pointing, very manageable by your local fire departments, very manageable by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, a standard fire that we suppress. When that fire occurs here in this fuel type, it's exceeding our direct suppression for pumps and hose. We'll be calling air attack for probable fire starts in this fuel type on the same day. Why is that? Why do you have two very different fire behaviors, but the same day, just different trees? It's because of the fine fuels. So aka in this photo, the spruce needles as an example, and how they're vertically and horizontally arranged. Okay. In the top left, they're very separated. Yeah, you have a white spruce here in the background and another white spruce here that, yeah, they probably will catch on fire. It might torch. The fire might come up it and consume the crown. But there's not another one right beside it for that fire to transfer its heat energy to and continue that combustion cycle. It stops, it dies out after about 40 seconds, comes back down the ground, creeps along here at 4 meters per minute, then hits this one, engulfs it, and then slows back down and keeps on treading through. On this picture, on the top right-hand side, it's got continuous fine fuel, so continuous spruce needles, that once the fire starts in this bottom left-hand side of the photo, for an example, it continually has fuel to feed the fire and moves throughout the stand as such. Does that make sense to everybody? I hope it does. Usually this is the best slide, bang for my buck, in terms of describing fire behavior. And for woodlot owners, I hope this gives you guys an idea on what kind of fire behavior you would see in your woodlots. The more deciduous you have in your woodlot, the less fire behavior you will see within it. So more deciduous, less fire behavior. More conifer, more fire behavior. Does that make sense to everybody? And that's why, because of the spruce or pine needles and their continual vertical or horizontal arrangement. A lot of folks get caught up on slash, and for all intents and purposes, slash is a hazardous fuel type. You'll see here, same day, same parameters, only moving at 5 meters per minute, but a higher intensity class. Why this is a hazardous fuel type for us isn't because of how fast the fire is moving through it. It's moving actually slower than if it was unaltered, possibly. What it's hazardous for is you think about 30 degrees heat and the sun bearing down on you, and you're wearing firefighting gear and you're carrying a 55-pound hose pack. You've got to climb up over all this stuff, cut your way through it to get to the seat of the flame that might be in here. It's very tricky for our firefighters to respond to and suppress fires in the storm damage fuel types, and that's why we call it a hazardous fuel type for ourselves in terms of forest firefighting. In terms of fire spread, it's actually a little bit slower sometimes, depending on, again, very dependent on what's there for laddered fuels, what's there for surface, canopy, and laddered mid-story fuels. Standing dead grass, I think, will stand out to most of you. At least I hope it does. Same day, same weather parameters. You get your ignition start. It's going to spread at 24 meters per minute. I can't run 24 meters per minute. I like to think I'm pretty fast. But the end state is grass fuel types, our flash fuel types, are highest common denominator fire occurrences that result in injury or fatal fires for us in terms of fire response. Even though they look deceivingly as a low fuel load, the fine blades of grass are much more or less dense than a spruce needle per se. And it takes a millisecond or so, not getting too sciencey, but it takes less time for each blade of grass to preheat to ignition point and then combust and continue the next grass blade to combust in that chain. In a spruce stand, it's much more dense. So it takes a little bit longer for that next spruce needle to catch on fire. You times that by 1 trillion in a wildland fire setting for these two photos. And that's the difference here of 9 meters per minute versus double at 24 meters per minute in the standing dead grass. Key thing here for you all as woodlot owners and folks throughout Southern Ontario is that it's dead. It's brown grass. If it's green, it's actually opposite. It's our safety zone. It won't burn nearly as much. It'll actually go down to less than 0.1 meter per minute spread once it's green. So green herbaceous material or deciduous material, aka ferns as well, and your grasses, when it's green, it's holding moisture. Moisture kills fire. When it's brown, it's not holding that same amount of moisture as when it's growing in green. It dries out much quicker from the solar radiation of the sun, and it gives you more probable fire growth. Right on. I just looked at my clock to make sure I'm still on time. 12:34. I'm right on. I think I'm 1 minute behind, but I'll catch it up, Paul and Olivia. For weather, very dynamic. It changes all the time on us. You guys know that, Canadians. You're constantly dealing with changing weather, right? For all other life's purposes, just driving down the road. Here you have trends of what we call a drought condition and then a problematic control stage in wildland fire driven by just the weather aspect of the fire triangle. Here you have starting off very low hazard on your top right-hand side. Each day, each row is a day. Throughout the fire season, AFFES, my team has 164 or 165 weather stations across Ontario that we monitor the weather stations for and the predicted fire behavior. And we catalog it throughout the season for all the regions of inside the fire region. And here you have each row is a drying day. Until you get down to this red section, I highlighted red that all fuel types in Ontario are readily available to burn. This is extreme. This is when you start to see your local fire bans come on. If the municipality, First Nation community, Department of National Defense, wherever you live, that fire chief has implemented a fire ban. It's because it's gotten so dry that we're predicting problematic control for new starts. We get 5 mils of rain on a day, and a lot of folks will say, well, why isn't the fire ban lifted? It's because there's 3 classifications of fuel in that forest stand. We already talked about fine fuels, and now you're experts on how fires grow through the forest because based on that fine fuel. There's also medium cost fuels that are about the size of my finger, and up to coarse fuels, which are about the size of my forearm and bigger. So all the sizes of combustible materials in the forest are broken down to three basic primary fuel types: fine fuels, medium fuels, and coarse fuels. When you get to problematic control states, the fine fuels actually only take 2/3 of one day to go from full saturation to supporting combustion after rainfall. Medium fuels take more rain to saturate and reduce their flammability, and coarse fuels take even more than that. You think about having your bed sheets out after the last time you did your laundry. The comforter, being a thicker material like a coarse fuel, takes more water to soak it in and wash it, and then vice versa. When it's hanging out on the on the drying line out in the sun, it takes longer for that comforter to dry out versus a bed sheet. The bed sheet, being a fine fuel on the occasion, takes on less water to saturate and wash, and then removes that water from the sunlight exponentially quicker. Same thing applies to the forest fuels if you're looking at it from that kind of a lens. That's why when you get 5 mils of rain and you think, oh, the fire chief should pull the burn ban, we're also not just looking at how much rain we got, we're also projecting into our future and saying, oh, we're not getting any more rain. The fine fuels are going to dry out in 2/3 of a day, and we're going to be right back to problematic control within a day or two. So to keep everybody on the same page, burn bans are often, and at the discretion of the fire chief ultimately, maintained even when you get a little bit of rain events here and there, but we're not forecasting more. So what do we do about that all? What do we do as woodlot owners? Now, with all this information and you guys being weather experts and fuel experts on wildland fire growth, I hope, you get to practice FireSmart Canada techniques. FireSmart Canada is a national program that all provinces and territories have adopted, including the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. We promote FireSmart for property owners, homeowners, to break the fire triangle of a fire going through the forest and or unfortunately consuming homes. And this is how you're going to do that. This is what helps me out tenfold every fire season, and helped me out a huge amount last year on the fires I was on last year when I was dealing with the urban interface fires. Fuel is why homes are lost, and it all has to do with the three methods of transport that the fire is occurring on the adjacent fuel and how it transports itself to the home. Ultimately, I'm after the protection of public life and reducing injury. Then next, I look to protect human values such as structures, homes, hospitals, long-term care facilities, hydro infrastructure, you name it, anything that's important to us for society to live on, including the homes. And then after that, I look at reducing fire spread within woodlots, like you might own. And I'm pretty sure everybody on this call can probably agree with me that yes, protect my life first, protect my home second, and then protect my woodlot after. If that's what you'd probably agree with that on. I don't usually have too much negative impacts on that side of my statements. The three methods of us losing homes, we're going to talk about home losses now, is from spark and ember transport first and predominantly. 90% of the time we lose homes from spark and ember transport. You think to your own home, I think of my own home. My home has a yard around it. In the forested stand, in the summertime, I'm in a mixed wood stand of lots of deciduous and conifer. It's shaded from the sun's solar effects of heating the forest floor. When the sun hits my home, it holds that heat and radiates that heat much quicker than the forest floor. If there's any fine fuel buildup on my deck, under my deck, or on my eaves, those fine fuels dry out exponentially faster because that solar radiation, that solar effect of the sun hitting them and not being shaded as compared to the forest floor canopy, under the forest canopy on the forest floor. So when you have a wildland fire occurring in a forested stand, because it's very hot and dry, you can imagine now with this little bit of knowledge that the fine fuels in open stands, such as your house, if it's got a buildup of pine needles on the roof or on the deck or under the deck, those fine fuels are even drier than the forested stand fuels. And when a spark or ember lands on that, it ignites it much more easily than it would in the forested landscape around it. So for intensive purposes, 90% of our homes that are lost from spark and ember transport in Canada and Ontario. Direct flame contact is what everybody thinks about, and a lot of folks think about the Fort McMurray videos. Unfortunately, I hate to pick on examples of past occurrences, but we will just for a learning opportunity. You think back to the wall of flame that we've all seen probably from the Fort McMurray videos and photos of 2016. A lot of folks thought that was it. That was the wall of flame coming into the community that lost a lot of structures. Well, you think back to Fort McMurray, and I got to work out of there in the winter hiatuses and as a rig hand, as a derrick hand in the Alberta oil field, and it's got a road that goes around where that fire come through, and the fire actually spotted over top of that road. So even though there's a non-combustible surface there where it blocked the direct flame contact, a lot of those structures, unfortunately, in the communities were lost from spark and ember transport, jumping the road and starting new little fires on the structures or adjacent to the structures' yards. And that's how we see, that's just an example of how we see lots of structure losses. It's not from the direct flame contact of the actual wildfire itself, it's from the sparks and embers starting new little fires ahead of it. The last and least, but less likely to consume a home or have a home lost from wildland fire is from the extreme heat of a wildland fire occurring. And for all intents and purposes, this extreme heat is coming off of a mature, fully stocked, high-yield jack pine stand that's continually arranged and producing a fire intensity class 5 or greater. So it's pretty rare to have these fuel types, especially in southern Ontario. But you can, in certain circumstances, have homes 30 meters away from an extreme wildland fire event occurring, where that heat is so great it shatters single window panes. And then it actually reverts back to embers and sparks of being able to go into the home and combust the home from the inside out, where they land on the sofas, they land on the curtains, they land on the rugs and the synthetic materials that are inside of a home. And it burns the home from the inside out because of the extreme heat shattering a single window pane. Now, good news for everybody on the call is if you're like me, and you're conscious about heat savings in the wintertime, because we live in Canada, most of you probably have double window panes at the minimum for reducing heat loss throughout the winter. Those double window panes, the outside can shatter, but it protects the inside one. So more often than not, the double pane windows, triple pane windows, they're very fire safe, and we don't see that extreme heat go through and break into homes the same way as a single window pane. And for all intents and purposes, this stat's a little skewed because it's taking into consideration outpost fishing camps that are only seasonal and only have single window panes. So big topic here. If you leave anything with this presentation at the end of the day, hopefully embers and spark transport, landing and starting new spot fires is the big takeaway for you on how to protect your home. To take all of what we just spoke to on this presentation, and it's 12:43, okay, good, and boil it down to what we do, and you want to protect your structure more than anything else, it's practice mitigation measures in the immediate zone of removing fine fuels such as dead leaves, dead grasses, dead pine needles in the immediate zone. You remove that and you eliminate a spark from starting a new fire on the structure, you save yourself 90% of the time statistically. And I do live by that in my adventures. As you move away from each structure, you can mitigate and treat fuels to manipulate the way fire will grow. We're going to talk about that. Here you have, I was responsible for this home on the bottom side in 2017 as a divisional supervisor on a pretty complex fire. The fire wasn't that big. It was only about 3,800 hectares in size. So for a wildland fire, it's a medium-sized wildland fire for us to deal with for the Ministry of Natural Resources. Most of your wildland fires in Southern Ontario are probably not going to exceed really like 40 hectares, not really exceeding 100 acres, for an example. This one was 3,800 hectares. We had a full crown fire approaching this residential home. There's actually 6 farms down the street from here. This home was the only one that survived the pass in this fire. And the only reason it survived the pass in the fire, it didn't have anything to do with me and my team. I was focused on treating a long-term care facility, a hospital, and critical infrastructure for the community that was threatened in the back side of where I took this photo from. I had to focus on that. And this home was left on its own through structural triage. The homeowners' practices saved their own home. So here you had a full crown fire moving through the forested stand, continuous conifer. What the homeowner did is well before the fire occurred, for years before, they pruned their conifers. And actually these conifer, Douglas fir for an example, where this is taken, is a self-pruning tree anyway, but they helped them along. They pruned the lower branches, they spread them out and had deciduous species around the home there for herbation materials. There's a couple of like little what are they called? Honeysuckles. They had those species there, less flammable. But the flammable tree species, they thinned and they pruned so that when that fire came through, it didn't have fuel to continue its combustion. No fuel, no fire, dropped to the surface of the forest and then continued to spread as a surface fire to the home. Once it got to the immediate zone, there was no dead fuel there to consume. So it didn't continue to spread to the home, and the home was saved. You might think, well, what about the ember and spark transport, Ken? And absolutely, that home was plastered with burnt out pine cones, small pieces of woody debris that was burnt, and they were embedded into the vinyl siding and all caught up in the decks and whatnot. But the homeowner swept and kept clear all the fine fuels, so those little embers didn't have anywhere to transfer their little heat energy to and start a new fire. They just burnt out. Same way as striking a match right now and dropping it on my desk. The match dies out before it transfers its heat energy to the desk. Now, if I crumple up a whole whack of paper and I put a whole whack of paper on my desk and I strike a match and I drop it, that match lights the paper, that then subjects the desk to more heat, and then the desk is lost. You eliminate the fine fuels out of the equation, you eliminate fire growth potential. Pretty cool, eh? Here's some things to avoid for homeowners. Woodlot owners obviously probably have a structure and whatnot. That's why I speak to it. Please avoid having a buildup of pine needles on your roofs, buildup of leaves in corners of decks and whatnot, as well as on decks and under decks. So embers can still transfer underneath the deck and cause those fine fuels underneath the deck to combust, and then the deck would be lost and the home would be subjectively lost as well. A lot of folks think of me and say, well, that's what the fire department's for. They'll be there to set up values protection and do our sprinkler systems and all that good stuff. And we are. We try very hard to be there in time to do that. That's my job. The essence is I can't always be there in time. And the essence is as well, even though I set up my sprinkler, for this example, in this bottom left-hand picture, there's a sprinkler on this tripod. Even though I set it up, if the homeowner has a buildup of dry, dead material underneath in corners where my sprinkler can't wet, or underneath decks where my sprinkler can't wet, those fuels will stay dry. And when the embers do come and land on it, they will subject the home to being lost about 30% of the time. Only about 70% of the time do my sprinklers work. And I have barely enough time to set up the sprinklers. I don't have enough time to clean up everybody's decks. And that's the essence of it as a firefighter. Here's a picture in Kenora from this past year. Kudos to the homeowner here that swept their deck before this fire came through. I know it's hard to tell, again, iPhone 12, but anyway, nothing against iPhone 12s. I don't have anything against them. It was just a bad photo. These embers, there's 2 embers here, and there's a bunch of other burnt out embers. They landed on this deck. It's a wooden deck, so you think, oh, it might be susceptible to ignition. They just burnt out, and there's actually blackened spots where the ember tried to burn the deck, but didn't have enough heat energy to continue that combustion cycle. It just burned itself out. The homeowner protected their own home before I could even get there this past spring, as a prime example. For woodlot owners, we look at immediate zones and the yards around our structures, trying to avoid lots of continuous conifer branches from the forest floor up to the top. If you simply prune off those lower branches, you can keep the conifer, absolutely. Just consider pruning the lower branches and consider keeping the grasses short, right close to homes, specifically 1.5 meters to 10 meters from a home. Or if you're really into landscaping, you can consider deciduous species and super short grass right next to your home. There's absolutely plants that are more flammable, like juniper bushes versus black-eyed Susan as species to have right against the home. But for the woodlot owners, this is the ticket. The extended zone, 10 meters to 30 meters of what we speak to every Canadian about and Ontarian about, of how to mitigate wildland fire growth. This is the messaging that actually applies to a woodlot owner as well. If you have concerns and it fits within whatever type of silvicultural techniques you're applying to your woodlot, the less fine fuels you have, the less fire behavior you'll have. Now, that in a nutshell, it's not practical to moonscape your woodlot, right? Because then nothing's going to grow and you're not going to have any succession. You're not going to have any regeneration, right, of all the other species you have. Just keep in mind, if you prune the bottom sides of the conifer as they grow and keep that crown base height as high as you can without sacrificing the health of the tree, and you follow the height of the tree as it grows for regeneration purposes, for let's say white spruce, for example, for whatever reason you want to grow white spruce, keep in mind, keep those lower branches pruned, and you'll do that. You'll protect your investment of that white spruce stand by reducing the chance it'll have of igniting if a flame goes through. And here's why. When the flames go through, they always start off as a surface fire. Winds and continuous fuel will push the fire up into the crowns of the trees, which will cause them to be lost. If you just simply prune off the lower bases, so a crown base height is about 2 meters above on a mature stock stand from the forest floor, you basically eliminate that chain. You break that chain and triangle from being able to have the fire take over the entirety of the spruce tree. Make sense? That's something you can do. Typically, red pine, white pine, very good self-pruners. White pine and red pine, for all intents and purposes, and many of you may have those species in your woodlots. They are very good self-pruners, and they do this naturally for you. It's just the spruce that sometimes need a little bit of a helping hand to self-prune, depending on the nature of their stand that they're growing in and their microsites. Deciduous trees, keep them all and keep as many as you want. Deciduous trees, their canopy blocks the sunlight, so it keeps that keeps cooler forest floor settings throughout the fire season when they do have foliage on them. They also maintain wind resistance, so that wind, you can all attest, you walk from the field into your woodlot, there's a lot less breeze in the woodlot than there is out in the open field, right? It's because it's getting blocked by that canopy. There's a lot of benefits for having the deciduous species there that reduce fire intensity when it's in the green up stage. In the brown up stage in the spring, so 3 days after snowmelt up until it starts turning green, that's your highest hazard for Southern Ontario. And vice versa is true for the fall. After the leaves have dropped off the deciduous trees and before you get your snow load, that's again your highest hazard time for fuel load in Southern Ontario and for your woodlot owners. Folks, I don't have to talk about this one because we're short on time, but this is just an example of why FireSmart matters and why it might mean something to you. Some of you might have restrictions on vegetation management from local bylaws, and that's fine. I picked on my dad up here in north of Timmins. He's got a shoreline restriction that he's not allowed to alter any vegetation within the shoreline. So he can't practice any FireSmart techniques there, as an example. And let's just say hypothetically, my dad's the one that doesn't want anything to do with FireSmart. So I picked on his house as example. I spoke to his neighbor listening to what I say. The homeowner practices the immediate zone, the extended zone, and treats the extended zone to the tactics that we spoke to. When a wildland fire starts and it spreads, comes towards the spots on the homes as the fire is coming on towards the community before we can get there in time, this is the essence of what we're trying to portray to the folks. This is all hypothetical. This didn't actually happen. I didn't actually burn my dad down. This is just an example of what we're trying to have homes and structures more resilient to the passing of a fire in case we don't get there in time, or if I do get in there in time, allows my sprinklers to have better protection and consolidates my efforts much more thoroughly. Sprinklers aren't the end all be all. Here's an example of it. And then for more information, you can visit FireSmart Canada. There's neighborhood recognition program aspects. There's wildfire community preparedness days that you can all apply for and get grants for. If you have a group that's interested in this, reach out to me to learn more about it. You can make your own documents that support that locally as well. So if you have your Ontario Woodlot Association magazines and all those other good things that you hand out, you can take any of the FireSmart information that's available and implement it into your messaging to help spread the education on wildland fire resiliency. Ultimately, we're trying to go from homes that might look like this to a home that looks like this. This home built up, lots of fine fuels on it. A flame front's going to absolutely continuously combust right up to the home. And I'm going to have a really hard time saving this home as a firefighter versus this home that's got less flame fuels around it and it's treated. To learn more, you can visit firesmartcanada.ca, like I spoke to. Check out the Ontario Interactive Fire Map. That's the map that I spoke to at the very first slide. You can zoom in on Ontario and see where the fire region line is and where it isn't, if it helps you in your endeavors. Our weather data for legal aspects doesn't encompass Southern Ontario. Our weather stations don't come down to there. We only look after our own sections. There is a federal fire hazard map available to you though as well. Just Google it, check on that interactive map, and it'll showcase you the weather risks for the day. And that's it in a nutshell. If there's any questions, Olivia and Paul.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ken. Yeah, we do have a few questions in the chat, and maybe in the interest of time, I'll just jump right to the questions. So we do have one here. Wondering, we did talk in the presentation about conifer plantations. Should landowners with deciduous or mixed forest still be practicing those zones?
Yeah, absolutely. And the emphasis is on still practice those zones because even though those deciduous or mixed wood stands, they're less volatile compared to a conifer stand, you still
Hmm.
have that spring window and that fall window that is a very can be a volatile fuel load based on if we're getting rain or not. Yeah, so I would absolutely yes still apply it.
Great. Okay. And then related to the extend into the zones, a question about the extended zone. Would eastern white cedar be considered dangerous in the extended zone?
That's a really good question. So Eastern was it Eastern white cedar? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So you have that's a really interesting one. It really depends on if it's got the ladder fuel types or not. Most often than not, our white-tailed deer or other critters are really good at pruning those trees for us because of the benefits that the white-tailed deer, as an example, get to eating the foliage, the lower leaflets of the cedar on the bottom side. They're pruned naturally from that aspect quite often. If they're pruned up above, then absolutely you can leave them the same as you would a red pine and a white pine. Now, for the case of where those cedars might be occurring on the edge of an opening and they got fully stalked crowns right to the forest floor or to the ground, you could treat those the same way as you would a spruce and prune them. Cedar burns very differently than spruce. It's still being somewhat of a conifer type of a fuel and still having some chemical aspects that do contribute to its volatility. They'll still burn pretty volatile. It's a midway point between spruce and your deciduous species. It's a really unique species, and I would say still treat it as a hazardous fuel type, the same way you would treat your red pine, your white pine, your spruce. Just
Very good.
because I don't want to get too sciencey into it, but yeah,
Yeah, of
they
course.
do burn pretty well.
Thanks very much. A question about prescribed burns. This person is south of Ottawa. If we are interested in doing a prescribed burn in our area, what group should we work with? Or
Awesome.
where would they start?
Yeah, there's tons of great groups. Well, not sorry, tons of great groups, but start I would say, and lands and forests. If they could jot down lands and forests, or they can reach out to me again too at the end of this presentation. I can put them in contact with the lands and forests company down south. A fantastic group of folks that go and do prescribed burning for private property owners. The Ministry of Natural Resources, for all intents and purposes, at this point, no longer or it doesn't do prescribed burning for private property woodlot owners at this time. Not to say we won't in the future, but it would be a private consultant that you would look at. And Lands and Forests is a fantastic company to reach out to. On top of that, also your local fire chief as well to make sure that it is something that is allowed in their municipal bylaws. So for those of you folks on the call that are inside the fire region, which might be few and far in between, the FFPA, sorry, what's now the Wildland Fire Management Act as of January 1st, it does and has allowed under the regulation for a homeowner to practice a prescribed burn so long as 7 criteria were met. But that's only one level of legislation. You also have your municipal governance and your municipal bylaws. So always check your municipality as well. And that would be probably the ultimate start. Reach out to the fire chief, ask them if it's something that they can do, and then reach out to a consultant after that to help them out.
Okay. We're getting very close to 1 o'clock, but just a
Yeah.
final question here related to that. Will a fire prevention officer at a local fire station review your property?
They can. It depends on the department. It depends on their capacity, and it depends on their program areas. So I could pick on some of the fire departments that I know do have fire prevention officers, and they do carry that out. The best thing I can tell you to do is to reach out to your fire department and ask for that. And if they say yes, then great. If not, then unfortunately you would be restricted to the stuff that I get to hand out on top of being a ministry representative. And you're more than welcome to reach out, and I can send you all the stuff to do it yourself.
Super. Well, thank you again, and thanks everyone for joining us. Paul, Kevin, thanks for introducing and wrapping things up, and we hope to see many of you next week. I will also pop in the chat that webinar link. for next week, and it's also on the Ontario Woodlot Association website. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Stay safe.